was really, I kind of wanted to spin it in a way in the discussion was, the value of these coaching clinics, right? It's the first one that I've been to live in, over 2 years. And I kind of become a coaching clinic, geek. Like, I don't think for a long time there, I hadn't missed the Roger Nilsson clinic in a long time. And certainly what the coaches site has done is, and obviously the USA Hockey level 4s and 5s are always, were always really exciting for me. But what the coaches site has done now, and I thought I just thought it would be a good group to have the discussion with, is, they've really kind of filled that niche of working with, I think, what they feel are the top level coaches, but their market, right, their focus is on youth coaches. And I guess the discussion, based off, and I can read some of the guys that spoke and some of the girls that spoke and some of the subject matter that went on. But I was just really, my feelings on this is, sometimes you go to these coaching clinics and all of you either spoke at them, for them and attended. And that's one of the things I've really been impressed about, right? Is that if you're going to these clinics and speaking, how many of the presenters actually sit through the whole clinic, and they're the most engaged. They're the ones always writing notes. They're the ones always taking notes. It's amazing to me. But really, the subject that I would love to talk about a little bit is just, how these coaching clinics relate to the bulk of the people you're going after, and that's youth coaches. And my feeling is sometimes they're way over their head. I know a lot of the guys that were at the coaching clinic for the coaches site out at the University of Michigan. There's probably at least 4 or 5 that I met that were at Daryl's clinic down in Florida. Daryl Belfry had his, I know Wally's mentioned his new podcast a little bit, but Daryl had his live session down in Florida. And I thought that was, again, the type of coaches that I met that were there, I'd be really hard pressed to see how they could take the information they got from that clinic and used it with their 8U and 9U players. So I'll just read you some of the guys that were speakers, which I thought were, again, I love the speakers, and I probably took these guys in maybe a little differently than maybe the other, another 200 set of coaches that were there. But Steve Spott spoke, Davis Payne, Paul McFarland, Mike Babcock spoke with his son, Michael, Todd Woodcroft, who's at the University of Vermont. He actually had two really good speeches, and I'll talk about the one that I enjoyed the most with him in the morning. David Barr came and spoke. Dan Muse from the U.S. NTDP program. Kara Mooney, Kara Morey spoke. I think Tim, I might have reached out to you on her, and she was actually fantastic. Her really well done presentation. Cam Abbott. And then on the ice, Brandon Naranjo, which I know a lot of you guys know, Pat Malloy, Nathaniel Brooks. I think he's with Ryerson University. He was actually really good. Kim Weiss, who's actually an assistant coach with the Maryland Black Bears, which I believe is an NAHL team down here in the States. Brock Sheehan, and that's like one of the subjects I'd like to talk about is Brock talked about developing a youth hockey practice. Brock is the coach of the USHL's Chicago Steel, which follows a lot of principles of youth hockey. But I don't know if you saw the program, if it would value your 10U team. Joachim Bloom, who is pretty cool. He did an on ice session. He works with I guess JRM skating and skills. So they had the music going in the rink and doing all kinds of flips and turns and doing circle drills on your elbow, all kinds of neat stuff. Leah Hextall spoke, who knows Sammy Joe very well. Bob Mancini, Mike Snee from College Hockey Inc., Dave Starman, and Chris Beach. Actually, I tried to get on here. Chris has a company in Vancouver called Aimability, which I thought I really enjoyed listening to him talk about. And then they had a bunch of other John Bacon. I don't know if you guys have read Let Them Lead. He wrote a book on the taking the worst place. Hal, are they in Minnesota?
Who's that?
They had the worst place team, and in high school hockey, and went on to win. Went from worst to first there, and so he had a great story about players leading the charge, and then Brad Fast from Honeybake. So I thought, it was a 3-day clinic. There was a lot of information there. I thought Aaron Wilbur, who Wally knows, did a great job of mixing in, the classroom type environment and going over to Yost Arena and doing the on ice. But I think and then obviously he lets me do my director's club. I got to Gino Cavallini was out there selling a product for paperless score sheets. He had connected with a group out there, and there was a lot of vendors there as well, which was for somebody like me who does a lot of sales to teams was great. And then obviously Aaron allows me to do my or helps me facilitate my director's club program, and we did one live out there with Cam Paddock, who's out with North Vancouver Winter Club, maybe it is, or so I guess he has a lot of. He was talking about the the challenges of that. That's like a pretty exclusive club I gather to belong to, and I also had on that same broadcast we had Matt Deschamps, who's an assistant coach with the Chicago Steel, and Matty had played for me growing up, and played at the University of Maine, coached at Red Bull Salzburg for a little bit. Real good hockey people. So I guess from Wally, from my perspective, and again, not to be a salesperson for the coaches site, because I think a lot of, I don't know how many on the call belong to the site, but to me, it's like a great resource to take little bits and pieces. And I send a lot of this stuff out to the clients I work with and the youth programs I work with. But I think from a perspective of a youth hockey coach, it's maybe just having the conversation about what the value is of going to a clinic like this, and then what recommendations would we give, especially from people that speak at these things all the time, to give to programs that could help better frame and what they're doing for the youth hockey community. I could certainly see a lot of the stuff that went on helping junior hockey, college hockey, pro hockey, a lot of stuff that Woodcroft talked about, and some of the NTTP program guys, Chicago Steel guys, really was based on teams having hours and hours and hours of ice and resources, and the opportunity to have the rink to themselves at all hours of the day. And I don't know how exactly that transfers to the youth hockey environment that often we talk about, and about that base of if we're going to make better players, we've got to help make better coaches. And I will say that the overriding theme of the 3 days that I was there really came down to communication. And it's funny how Wally brought up the mission statement part, is that you could hear in all of these presentations coaches talked about, a lot of it had to do with what kind of culture they had set up. Dave Barr actually had a great speech on that, and Kara Mori talked about what she's done with her players and how they got them to believe and gain some grit, and really just have that piece in the back of their head that the communication aspect was so important. And I think my honest opinion is that I think that's where we lack the most at the youth hockey level. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, it's certainly something that if you're a member, you'll have access to all those presentations anyway, because they'll start to, they'll edit them and put them on the site. And again, I thought it was a great opportunity to see people finally, face to face. And my value from a lot of these clinics, most of the time, is the time that I'm not in the clinic, that I'm out, speaking with the other coaches and the people that are attending these programs, and just having these conversations offline, based off of some of the matter that was given to the clinic. So I'll leave it at that for now, but if you have any questions. But I think it's I think it was a really great opportunity for me, just as a coach that works with a lot of coaches, to hear a ton of other content, But I think selfishly, I think those 3 days was no different than what we do here on this call, and a lot of the conversations that we have, and really valuing these great, the great hockey people that you have in the room together.
And Mike, it is a great group, and as you were speaking, and you're the only one with hair that's still the original color. Just about every one of us has been to multiple coaching clinics over the years, and the biggest not a concern, but I'm always curious about what will people take away that they will apply and make useful for their coaching environment. And you're working with youth hockey and associations like many of us have, and Tim's working with international female hockey, and I'm not actively coaching. Health still is. So when you go to a clinic like this, I'm really curious if there's anything you are going to take away and hands-on experiment with sooner than later.
Yeah, well, I think for me, like the opportunity to be there and speak to the presenters off of their subject, and like Todd Woodcroft was great. Like we were joking around. One of his presentations he did in the morning that was actually sponsored by Huddle, which is the company that does a lot of the video editing and housing of all this video for these pro coaches and college coaches. And Todd was just talking about the need for video and how much they use it. And one of the kids he brought was his video coach from UVM, which I thought was fantastic that he brought this young guy who by the way had never played hockey, didn't know anything about hockey, just knew how to sort video and loved computers. And he gave him a job as their video guy, and he's really taken to it. But I think one of the funny things for me was how this person who had nothing to do in the hockey world, wasn't a player, was really one of the highest level people at the clinic, working with the highest level athletes in the program. So it just reaffirmed to me, how many other things there are out there other than being a player and a coach, that you could be active in the sport of hockey, and how there's just tons of opportunity for young girls and boys to not only have to aspire to be, a head coach or a player at the Division I level. But I know Tom had his hand up. Yeah.
Tom, your speaker.
There you go.
Yeah, I've probably attended more clinics than anybody in the world, because I went to every Hockey Canada one. They used to have one every 2 years, and then they stopped doing it. Then the hockey site, and but I go to international ones. I really love the international ones. So I've done Bratislava, Vienna, Prague, Helsinki, and other places. And the neat thing about them is you get tickets each night to go watch games. And they don't go crazy either. They just go till like 4 p.m, and they realize that one of the benefits is being there with coaches and that you can talk, because the Hockey Canada ones used to be nuts. I remember Johanny came to one in Calgary, the last one in Calgary, and they started off at our breakfast. There's a guy talking, and we went to 10 at night. And he said, "Are you North Americans crazy? You think you're going to learn everything about hockey in 3 days?" Yeah. And yeah, so I just like it because you get really the feel of the European hockey and the teams chanting, and there's always a big, huge tent outside and beer gardens, and screen to watch the game, and a lot of them in places like Bratislava, the old town. Everybody goes down there in the old town, and they're singing their songs, and the different countries, and wearing their jerseys, and so that's an added thing, and it's probably cheaper to pay for the conference and go, because you get the tickets, plus they feed you a couple of times a day and a big discount on the rooms. And, so I was going to go to the one in Finland this year, but I was a little nervous. The Russians might shoot us out of the air, so I didn't go. But just thought I'd throw that in. They're really beneficial. And what I do is I take snapshots of the PowerPoint presentations, because they used to give a handout, but now they basically do PowerPoint presentations. And, there'd always be a handout, and then everybody would contribute a drill. And then some committee would pick out on different topics, and some committee would choose what they thought were the best ones and then put them together and give you a package. And I thought that was a kind of an added bonus there too. So yeah, that's my 2 bits worth here.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right, Tom. I mean, one of the things that I would love, and when you go to these things, I think you get so much more value out of the time away from the presentation than you do in the presentation. So having, and we talk about this all the time just in teaching, right? I mean, if you're going to sit there for 8 hours in an auditorium and listen to, one good thing Aaron did do, I think, in this format was all the speakers only did like 25 minutes. It wasn't like a 50-minute presentation.
He started doing that about 5 years ago with the coaches site ones, like in Vancouver. I went to a bunch. Yeah. Because you sit there for hours. It's really tough.
Yeah, and for like somebody like me, and getting back to Wally's point, like what can you take away? Like if Kara gave her presentation and then they did a breakout room and said, okay, anybody that's interested in this subject can go to this other room and actually speak and talk and interact with the speakers and the person and that subject that you wanted to hear. I would think like that to me, and that's why, how like a lot of the USA hockey stuff I love is because of the fact that they've done like these, like you could sign up, like you do your level 5 in USA hockey and you're in the whole presentation, but then you can sign up for breakout presentations. So if you're there and you're an 8U coach or a midget coach, you're splitting, like you're not listening to the same subject matter. You can go off to the subject that you're most interested in. But I agree with you, Tom. It's like the great opportunity to be able to sit and actually talk to the person who's presenting and grab knowledge out of them. It's so much easier now. Like even me, I meet so many coaches just on Twitter, just sending them a direct message and asking them a question. And people are so great about returning information because I think they're so much more accessible than they were in the past. But from my use, like if I'm thinking about how can I digest this and then bring this to my youth hockey communities that I work with, is really difficult because a lot of the stuff's not transferable.
Yeah, that's true. But a lot of it is you can take it down a little. I found that the international conferences were a lot of stuff more directed at, youth hockey and how to coach.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. That I think, it's funny because I was just in Helsinki a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking the same thing when you see the map on the plane and you see St. Petersburg is right there. You're like, all right, well, I'm getting in and getting out, but it is. I love that the fact that and Europe, and there was a lot of Europeans over here as well. By the way, there was a lot of Scandinavians and Europeans over in Michigan. I bet you they've made up 10% or more of the conference for them coming here and listening to these speakers that they have on tap as well.
Yeah, I was at one in Germany. Can't remember the city, but anyways, the Swedes had a bus full of coaches came, like 50 coaches. And that's what they wanted to change the way they were coaching. And they all came to it. Then they'd meet, to come up with, how we can adapt this into our programs.
Tom, I wanted to comment as you're talking. Having been at so many clinics, I've had more spontaneous things happen that have affected me for the rest of my coaching life than I did from a clinic. So, and the one of them I'll bring up because Tom is on. I just walked into the arena when his friend Johanny Walson was on the ice, and he did a passing sequence to teach eye contact and timing that to this day is off the wall. and it's something that youth coaches can do. And I've adapted it into doing coaching clinics, built it into the ice time, my clinic, but it's something to me that merits being done at the right age and the right stuff, right amount, right time, and Tim's right way applied. And I'm curious, Hal and Tim, the number of coaching clinics that you've gone to, and what were some of your greatest ever takeaways, or were they like mine, where you just happened in on a practice or you sat down and had coffee with somebody? So, Hal, can you comment on from your experience?
Sure. So I think I'm a veteran of the USA Hockey Clinic program, having gone through the original, they used to call it the master class. It was in 1983 or 4. You had to get invited to go to it. Now all you have to do is sign up and pay a lot of money. But I went to maybe 4 or 5 of the IHF clinics. That's where I first met Tom. It might have been in Prague. I don't remember, or I can't remember what. That's when we first met in person. And the one in Prague had Ludek Bukac was a speaker, and then we went to the ice, and he showed what he was doing to develop quick hands, quick feet, and all that stuff, and he called it the Variable Goals Training Program. And that made a big impression on me. In fact, I still use a lot of that stuff. And Mike, I've got a couple videos of it on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. It has, to me, brings a couple things. One is that the kids in the United States, they've never seen this stuff before, right? And we know that most kids are pretty bored with the same 10 or 12 drills that they've been running forever and ever. And they're very challenging for them, and they really, really have fun doing them, and you can adapt them and do some stuff. But the other thing about, I think, can't remember if we were in, I don't remember which clinic, but all those clinics in Europe bring in non-hockey people, you know, and there was the one from the French Track Federation that was talking about, you know, lactic acid. And, you know, we always talk about lactic acid is what slows down our legs. And they go, that's not true at all. There's nothing to do with it. And the research and the science they put into stuff. So what happens when you get tired is your brain goes into defense, and it recruits less muscle fiber to do the work because it's conserving. And world-class athletes can override that. Young people can too. They can override it by just having good mental conversations. I'm not tired. Come on, and you can train yourself to do that, because, you know, it's sort of like the what is it, Louise and whatever her name, were driving their car over the cliff, that movie, right? And your brain's kind of going, no, we're going over the cliff. You know, you're losing energy. And it goes into a defensive mode, and you can train yourself out of that. So I just always, and then they brought in, I think one year they brought in the guys from, I think it's called the Blacks or whatever, the rugby team in Australia.
The All Blacks.
The All Blacks, right? And to talk about their team culture. That was a really cool presentation. You never see that here. Well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't been to a USA Hockey one for a number of years. But Mike, I think your assessment of the clinics are that they are pretty high level, and majority of translating that information and taking it down to squirts, peewees, or whatever is, you know, it's a whole different deal, right? And I see guys go to that and they go, all right, we're going to use, I had a guy tell me that he taught his U12 team, the Winnipeg system, the Winnipeg Jets system, because that was his favorite team. I'm going, well, what about skating and passing and stuff like? No, we just play their system. So I don't know. There's no perfect way. There's no right way. Guys like you, Mike, are doing a great job carrying the water and sharing the gospel. And I did it for a long time, but I get tired after a while. So
No, you're
actually got,
Al, I think you're right though about but you see, I think that's the difference, right? In some coaches and the people that come to these clinics that can, like what Tom's doing, are you able to take the pieces you gathered and know how to decipher them into different modes, or are you just a copycat, right? Are you just taking like, oh well, because I mean, really, like I felt so bad for the JRM guys or JMR guys, the guys that did the power skating and they do a lot of like their biggest power skating phenomenal phenom in Sweden right now. Like they put a clinic out there and they sell out within 5 minutes. But it doesn't do anybody justice to see a 15-minute presentation at Yost Ice Arena because there's really no context in it. Like there's no building blocks. There's no, like, it's hard to look at that and say, like, I'd rather be on this call for 22 weeks than be in a 3-hour clinic where there's no context into that presentation that gets told, because you don't really, unless you're really going to dig in and understand, to your point, Hal, I mean, there's 500 level 5 coaches in USA Hockey right now that I would never allow to go on the ice with my kids ever. just because they're able to pay and be able to, I guess, fight through 3 days of clinics doesn't make you a great coach. It just gets you the certification you need. But I think for my piece of this, the reason I go to these clinics is probably more from Wally's side. And that's just for the connection and the ability to take a couple of little different pieces out of it to help me, not just check a box that I went to the clinic. And I will say this, the one good thing I like about the coaches site, although they're trying to change this a little bit, is there's no credit. Like you don't get, like you didn't earn, like the people that are there are going there because they want to be there. Like they want to learn. Although I think
what is the coaches site? What is the coaches site?
I'm sorry?
The coaches site, what is it? Is it I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, so they kind of took the place. It's just an international depository of presentations. They have a lot of guests. They'll do Wally's mission statement workshop and make it a course. Hopefully that's the goal. But a lot of this is just watching. They do a lot of they get a lot of high level coaches. And outside that game of hockey as well. Aaron actually does a really good job of finding a lot of people outside just the hockey world to give presentations, and then you can access those presentations all the time. I mean, I think probably for companies like his and platforms like this, COVID actually probably helped them because it became much more acceptable to do online presentations and do PowerPoint presentations over Zoom. So it really, I think it helped them build this database of coaches. So, but again, I think it's just another vehicle for coaches to access.
It's a subscription site, a couple $100 a year is that right?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny. They just had a promotional campaign going on now where it's like $59 a year, which is really, I mean, it's actually unbelievable for the content that's there. It's I think it's a great value.
I'll go sign up. That's cool.
I think that's great. And I was waiting for Sammy Joe to get on, and I'll let Wally go, but I want to talk about Leah Hextall's presentation as well at some point.
Okay. Sammy, when we couldn't get a hold of Howie, I sent an email to him this morning. I CC'd you on it, trying to get him up in the future because I'm intrigued about what you said in the last Shark session about his team building and your goalie coach of that team that attended. So down the road, and this is what I mean, Mike, people go to formal clinics, and the general question I have, I got more out of an hour with Sammy and just watching her interact with the young athlete. And then I sat there with Sammy and talked to and asked questions to some of the coaches that were at our table. And my questions were absolutely dated. Like, do you know Seth Martin? But for me, I got so much out of that. And I'm really curious. I've learned, I've gone to so many as we all have, but I've learned from everybody on this call, but in particular, working close with Tim and having him come on the ice and watch him adapt drills to make them purposeful. It was a wow moment for me. I've seen a few people do it, but very few. So that fundamental teaching aspect at the U9 and U11 level, the hop, skip, and jump to the kids who can already skate and pass and get into tactics, and those that have paid a lot of money for individual help. So, and I just wanted to let you know that more is learned from these sessions than that. Now, Tim, I'm curious. He might have slipped out. Tim Bothwell, can you share your takeaways from coaching clinics you've experienced in the past, and what you've learned the most from that you've actually taken home and away? Go ahead, Tim.
Well, thanks, Wally. Well, there are probably too many to even begin to list. I haven't been to too many the last 5 or 8, 10 years, but they're extremely useful in every way in terms of gathering tactical information, of course, which is everybody's number one goal. And I think it's probably maybe a good platform to re-emphasize one of the things you learn as you get more experienced as a coach is, and I think most of us would generally agree, is that the tactical side, although very important, is not as important as the relationship building side and the team building side, especially in the female game, but of course equally or near equally important in the male game. And maybe perhaps, so I guess my one takeaway is after attending many clinics early on in my coaching career and hearing people speak about that part, the relationship building part and the caring part, the trust building part, and how important it is. As a young coach, I was kind of like, yeah, okay. But I still put my focus on the tactical side and kind of ignored the social relationship building side. So maybe it's a good platform to reinforce it. Now I've been in coaching for 30 plus years that, you know what? Yeah, that is the most important thing. Build relationships with your players and build the trust between the coaching staff and the players. And then you have the foundation to have the best team that you can have. And of course, again, tactics are important. And maybe perhaps the current example, and I'm not sure if Mike or Hal are in tune, but the Memorial Cup was last night. And it was a very, very unique situation where one of the best teams in the Quebec Major Junior League finished the regular season with 16 straight wins and then lost in the first round of the playoffs, and they were hosting the Memorial Cup, so they're in. They had 40 days to prepare for the Memorial Cup. They made a coaching change, which to me is astoundingly courageous of the management staff, and it turned out tremendously for them. They won the Memorial Cup last night, and Gardner McDougall, longtime Canadian, probably maybe the second most successful Canadian university coach ever behind Claire Drake. Perhaps Tom Watts in the conversation, but the succinct message was when he took the job is like, what do you have to do in this short-term period? His answer was, well, we got to build trust and we got to do it fast. And it's not easy to do fast, but he obviously did it. It was very successful. So that's a long kind of really maybe non-answer, Wally, to reinforce to all the coaches out there that relationship building and honesty and communication between the staff and your players is of the utmost importance.
You're on mute, Wally.
Wasn't able to watch the final. What was the final score, Tim?
It was 6-3. It was a good game, but St. John was for sure the better team on this night. They scored twice real early in the first 3 minutes, and then it was 2-1, and then they scored twice in 30 seconds in the second period, but they won 6-3. Quite a story, and again, quite a remarkable decision by their management, which turned out for the best. Gardner's a terrific person and obviously a fabulous coach, a 7-time Canadian University champion. So,
yeah, I just wanted to let you all know, to our American friends, Gardner is from Eastern Canada and the Atlantic Canada, and we know him well. Myself, having worked with him and Alan Andrews over many years, and he's definitely knows how to build a winning culture in a short term. I'm so happy for him because that's an example of doing the right things the right way in a short term. It's just amazing. But kudos to Gardner. Tim, I'm going to edit that portion out. It's a highlight portion to me of what you said about what Gardner did because the boys played together. I watched previous games and I was absolutely blown away by what he did. And you don't need the most brilliant the most brilliant X and O guy. So, Michael Bonelli, go ahead.
Wally, if I could interject, it would be great. And I met Gardner, I think it was his first year at UNB, was my last year at U of C, and I met him briefly at the national championship, I think. But it would be great, especially if you and Alan know him well, to reach out and maybe if he'd come on and talk a little bit about his process of relationship building in that example specifically, and kind of where did the balance fall for him when he took over between that and the tactical part? How much tactical change did he feel comfortable taking on? What did he do? It would be really very, very interesting. And I think he's only the third coach to have won a Memorial Cup and a CIA or a Canadian University Championship, Mike Babcock being one and Mike Keenan being the other, I believe. So it would be great to try to get him on.
Oh, yeah. Listen,
in the coach's site.
I'm always concerned what we might talk about, and it turns out to be some pretty great things. This morning when I, on short notice, called Mike Bonelli because I got a text from Sammy, a future session. We want to get Howie Draper on to talk exactly about that and the short-term competition and what they went through and how well he handled it, according to the goalie coach. So that's down the road. Mike, you've got Matteau and Biche as possibilities down the road. We've got to get Cavallini on down the road. And I'm going to add to that list McDougall because I know him well enough to talk to him on the phone and talk him into getting on. And he's got a doctorate in common sense. Like he doesn't beat around the bush and he doesn't confuse you with linguistics and it does get results. So, Mike, you had your hand up. And Sammy, welcome on. I'm glad you're here. I've got a few things to talk about with the group about meeting Kim McCullough at the skills clinic Hockey Canada put on, and some of the impressive things they did. I stopped in for an hour and a half, had lunch, watched them do an exercise with all the coaches. I took more out of that. Maybe it's because I'm old and realize I didn't know a damn thing when I was taking those clinics. I didn't know a damn thing, but I didn't know it. So that was a problem. Mike, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to just talk about what Timmy mentioned about just the overriding theme was on those 3 days. It was all about how are you connecting. You can't do any of the stuff you want to do tactically until you can connect with your team. Girls, boys, men, women, older players, younger players. It was all about the connection and the relationships and finding out about the human being. And I think by far that was if you took a survey on what was the terminology that came up the most out of all those presentations, it was really the connection to the players. And it was funny watching Naruto do his on ice. He actually had the University of Michigan players be the skills guys that are out there doing the drills for him. And you could hear the banter and the way he spoke with them and the way he communicated with them, how close he really was to them. He wasn't just the coach. He was actively involved and knowing who they were, little nuances about their relationships they had with each other and on the team. So that was really fun for me to watch. And on the Memorial Cup side, Tim, I got to watch. So my boys and I watched that last night. And I think the person we got to interview, the Tavish kid, who after that game, watching the Memorial Cup championship get run, being the only player on the ice sitting there watching that ceremony. And I thought that was just, to me, like I just love the fact that you could see how hurt he was in that loss. But just to me, it was more showing, like, wow, I want to just soak this in and see and watch these players, that have just won and kind of celebrate them winning. So I thought it showed a lot of great leadership, and I didn't know that about the coach until they announced it on the broadcast last night about how they had changed coaches after this great successful season, and here they are now just flipping the switch and using somebody else to help them get to that championship. So that's a great, I'd love to hear that story and that process. I thought that was great.
Yeah, Tom's got his hand up. Wally, just a quick interjection that you will enjoy. The best, most skilled player on the Hamilton team is a really short stick guy. Definitely a short stick, so I thought I'd throw that in. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Johanni. I presented with him in Yursinov in Helsinki, and it was amazing what he did. He prepared booklets for everybody, colored, colored and cards, pocket-sized cards for everybody with colored diagrams and this sort of thing. And then the on-ice presentation, he wanted me. I always went on ice for those guys, and I talked a little bit, but he had his hockey class from Turku. And so many pros have been in his hockey class, like Kiprasov and the Koivus and Hanu Verta and those kind of guys. And but he prepared it. And that's one thing about sometimes the on ice presentations are really clunky because the kids have never seen it before. I remember in Vienna, you got English coaches trying to tell the Austrian kids what to do, and some are good at English and some aren't, and kind of a struggle. So he'd rehearse the thing. So when he said in English what they're going to do, I'd go to say something to the kids. They were already doing it. And they did probably 3-4 times more on that one on ice session, just because they're just like anything, if you're prepared first. And it was amazing, just the professionalism of the presentation. So yeah, Johanni was quite the guy.
Yeah, and I'll sort of reiterate what Mike had been talking about. Is my experience with clinics early on especially, was a lot of really tremendous tactical information, but very little attention to how you teach it. I always felt like, and they've changed a little bit, and they're more aware of that these days. That they, most presenters will include, some drills on how to actually get across the message they might be trying to deliver. But I agree with Mike, especially in a power skating situation that he mentioned. It would be way more useful for them to instead of trying to give the audience a big picture of all the things that they're so good at, which is kind of an error most presenters make. Like, focus in on something and give the coaches in the audience, some very basic, simple learning progressions, maybe a 3 or 4 step progression to learning how to backwards stride, which is one of Wally's favorite topics and a good one. How to, transition from forward to backward. How to teach things in very simple, short progressions, and that's often missing in many of the coaching clinics. And we could maybe, pause to again welcome Sammy Jo, and then just get some insight as to what her experience was like at the goaltending clinic she was at with Hockey Canada recently, with respect to all this.
Yes, well, hello, everyone. Great to hear from all of you guys. And it sounds like what Wally experienced with Kim and Keto was very similar to what I went through. So huge kudos to Katie Greenway. I don't know if any of you guys have coached with Katie in Calgary. Yeah. So she works for Hockey Canada, but is also a goalie, but also a coach within the Hockey Calgary system. And I think she really brought that out of all of the clinics and the various different on ice and in classroom sessions that we did, having the knowledge that it is important that we know how to teach this material, not just that we learn this material. So there's a lot of great group discussion as well. And I thought that within the group discussion, the goalie coaches really, at least our group, talked about how we would implement this at different age groups. How would you teach it? If they are not doing it, what is another way to perhaps verbalize it or say it in a different way so that the teacher, the coach, has a lot of different iterations of how they could manage the same kind of drill or situation. And goaltending is a lot about minutia of detail. So it is more similar to perhaps coaching a golfer or a kicker or a thrower, for instance, in track and field, than it is about tactically the game of hockey. We did talk about goalie IQ and how important that is in knowing the game. But really the minutia of detail is what was interesting. And the in-person clinic, this is, it is the first time they did it in conjunction with the Team Alberta goalie camp. So they had 30 goalies, or 20 goalies, I guess, at the U18 level, and then at the U16 level for both boys and girls, and then at the U14 level for boys. And so we had constantly sessions that the coaches were hopping on. So we had a group of 6 of us, and every session, every hour, 2 of us would go on, and then 4 of us would evaluate what was going on, and then we'd talk about it after. I thought Brad Kirkwood was exceptional on the ice, teaching primarily the girls, and the way that he taught his instructors as he was teaching. I absolutely loved the way he did that and broke it down. And what he did differently than the way I run my goalie schools was that he had everybody doing the same thing at the same time, but then so he would explain it once, and then he would go off, every group would go off into 8 different stations and do the same thing. So that the instructors who were younger and maybe first-time goalie instructors would learn directly from Brad the verbiage and language that he wanted to implement throughout the Alberta system, and hence Hockey Canada as well. So that was a real, it was great. I had never really seen it done that way. And Tom, to your point, he came prepared and he came knowing his role as much as he was helping the goalies, he was helping these instructors as well. And so that was one thing our group definitely took away from the way to teach the instructors as much. But yeah, I loved the ability to have these conversations with other clinicians, so other groups, and being in often when I'm at a conference, we'll say, which is what this is, there isn't time to process information or to talk about the information you just learned. And I thought what Katie did an exceptional job of was really working in group work talk and group work situations where you are sitting in a practice stand with those other 6 people from your group. And you're having a conversation about what's going on and what you would do differently, or what works or what doesn't work. And I've never really experienced a conference like that, where you feel like you have left not just with this waterfall of information in your brain, but being a better coach, leaving as a better teacher, and having learnt from the people around you who, I mean, most of these guys are elite level goalie coaches and they have either their own business or they're working OHL or NHL. I mean, it was incredible, the crop of people. So it was really just a pleasure to be around all that. I could go on and on about goalie camps, so I will stop on that. But yeah, it was just a real pleasure to be at.
Well, as often, feel free to go on and on, Sandy. The goalie thing is in large degree a mystery to many of us, but like as Tom and I think you just said this as well, but as Tom and Mike alluded to, some of the most valuable parts of the conferences I've been to are the conversations over a beer, the bullshit sessions over a coffee in the morning, and most conferences totally miss that and don't provide enough opportunity for that. That sounds like Katie did maybe a little bit better job.
Well, and what I love, Tom, too, is, you know, as a 46-year-old woman with a young family, I like sleeping, you know, so I'm missing out on all those beers because I'm just not going to go at the end of a long day. Right. So that's hard. And so there is that component going on. But I liked that it wasn't solely that, because you're right, that's where it all happens. But lunches and just hours here and there that were built into it that didn't preclude those of us who enjoy sleeping, or maybe it's the only chance we actually get to sleep, from, participating in all of that. Because you're so right, Tim, that's where everything really happens, is in those moments where you get to meet everybody else.
Yeah, and it, like as you just said, that it's so darn easy when you think about it. Is like Tom alluded to, and again, Mike. Number one, have some shorter presentations. Number two, make it a focus, not to, drive people from morning till night, from 7 to 10. But it's so easy just to schedule a 2-hour minimum lunch in the middle of the day where everybody can get themselves fed for half an hour. And then there's an hour and a half right there where you're all together. And if you want to wander off and do something, you can. But then there's an hour and a half right in the middle of the day. You've had a little bit of information in the morning, and now you got a chance to talk to some of the people you want to talk to and ask questions and share ideas and gather information. And then maybe even do the same thing at dinner, like 2-hour lunches and dinners instead of, hey, let's take 30 minutes to eat something now and get back to jamming information down your throat. So it sounds like it was a little bit better. And like Tom said, like some of the Europeans have been doing something like that for a number of years, but it's really the best way to do it in my mind. And I think, Tom, you had your hand up, so you go.
Yeah, I just, am I on here? Yeah, I just want to share a story about in Vienna. So basically in the international ones, they knock it off at about 4:00 so that you can go to the game and all this kind of stuff. But it was really neat because Scotty Bowman was presenting. So every night he kind of held court and be a big, a table with about a dozen of us sitting around, and he just told stories for 2 hours because he loves to talk. And that was one of the greater experiences I had. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share there.
I'll quickly interject there because it's a Scotty Bowman story. When he was at the little conference we had in Charlottetown, Sammy, when we were there in 2005, and he was tremendously entertained by Mel's story of our triathlon that year. It was so funny. He listened rapidly as Mel told all the details about, now we had to cut down 3 or 5 players and blah, 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 blah. And his comment at the end, after all the tragedy we had in the triathlon, the injuries, he just looked at Mel and said really quickly, maybe one more of those triathlons and you won't need to make any cuts. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, just a point of reference, Sammy too. I was just talking about how these are set up, and I say this about athletes and teams all the time. Just talking about like when kids have to buy sweatsuits, or like not everybody is in the same situation. So I think that's a really great point to bring home to these coaching clinics and seminars and programs that you got it. You can't cater to the least denominator, and that's pizza and beer at 6:30 at night, right? As the only time that you're gonna, that these social beings are gonna happen. And
or Mike, what's going to happen is you're going to get the same kind of coaches over and over and over, right? So you're right.
Track the same people, and one of the things that I laugh about, and I try to give a lot of breaks between when I do the coaching clinics for USA Hockey in our regional areas, because everybody's late anyway. Like the coaches that are there that want to talk, they all grab the speaker and they're all in the hallway interrupting the next speaker anyway. So just make the time, build in the time, because that's really where a lot of the learning happens. And where if you're able to bring these great speakers in and these great teachers in, then that the whole allure to me is the access to those people, right? So I think knowing that and saying, well, yeah, we don't, like, it's like the hockey clinic that says, oh, we do 6 hours of on ice a day. Well, is that really beneficial? Is it where this actually is worse? Like, I don't want to go to a clinic that has 6 hours on ice. But Tim, right? It's just a matter of saying, okay, there's a clinic, there's a built-in time. Whether you could go, you could go drink if you want, go in the parking lot and drink, or you could be there and actually have these small little groups of conversations where the learning really happens and the interaction really happens. And how many people feel comfortable even at the highest level of coaching of raising their hand in an auditorium to ask a question when they could get that maybe answered in between in the hallway in between these sessions. So I think it's a great insight for anybody running a coaching clinic to know that not everybody in that clinic is there to sit down and have beers until 11:30 at night. And how can we make windows of opportunity to meet these speakers and educate within the clinic itself? And maybe, and I don't know if this is a good time. I wanted to bring up Leah Hextall's only.
Oh yeah, great.
Sammy,
yeah, sure, go ahead, Mike.
So I was at the airport waiting to get picked up to go to the conference, and the young man that was getting us said, "Oh, we got to wait around a little bit. We're bringing Leah Hextall in." So I said, "Okay, let's we'll wait around." And she gets in the car, and it was funny how we had the conversation. So, so what's your subject about? She goes, "Well, I'm not sure if you're really going to be too happy about this." so she really didn't give me the full gamut of what she was going to do, because I think she wanted it to be a surprise, but she really did. Her whole presentation was about not being one of the guys. And I thought it was and it was funny how, and I don't know if it was more virtue signaling from the 98% of the men that were in attendance. But they all like really like, oh, that was so impactful and it meant so much. And I just thought I'd bring it up only because I don't know if it's not impactful unless people act, right? So it'll be interesting to see how impactful it really was. But her speech was just about her journey of trying to get into broadcasting, and how women in that hockey world don't get the opportunity to be a seasoned broadcaster without somebody saying, well, we're going to give you the opportunity to be a seasoned broadcaster. So her whole speech I thought was great. She mentioned you. She mentioned Dave Starman, who she was actually, I didn't know this, but she was actually on, she did an NCAA game, which is the longest, 5 overtime game in the history of the NCAA. So I thought it was great that she acknowledged the people that she associated with growing up, and some of the limitations that she had trying to get into the business. But I just thought I'd bring it up only because I did actually think it was a great presentation. But I think it's one of those things when the people that have the power to make that change, which obviously ESPN did, by saying, okay, we're going to make you a seasoned commentator by giving you opportunity to be a seasoned commentator. I thought it really was the take home point of the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I love Leah and what she has done. I mean, she probably alluded to this in her career, but as a play-by-play person, she would go and sit at the University of Manitoba Bison games and just sit in the back row and just pretend to broadcast, because nobody would have her as the play-by-play. And she just kind of had to build herself up, and nobody was giving her a chance. And because nobody gave her a chance, she didn't have anything under her belt. And she just kept plugging away, which lots of people would have been turned away, and probably lots of women were turned away, but she just had that strength of character to keep going. And the foray that she has made into sport, I think, to trailblaze for so many of us is incredible. But it is, if you search Leah Hex on Twitter, I would say 95% is negative. If you search any woman on Twitter or on social media, 95% of it is negative comments about them being a commentator. And I mean, I have a limited exposure to it, and I do mostly women's games, so I don't get as much misogyny on social media. But I did do one NHL game, and the amount of negative comments and misogynistic comments on social media was overwhelming for simply one game. So I think of Leah getting that every single day, or Jennifer Bottrell getting that every single day. Like, it just, I mean, the strength of character that they must have, but also some of the downtimes that they must experience, because you don't want to accept it, but when people are just saying it over and over and over, it's hard. And you really have to notice the positive comments, and you have to rely on your network of people to know that you did a good job. But that's why people like Leah, Tara Sloan, Cassie Campbell, I mean, those guys not only have to do a good job on TV, but they have to put up with just still so much. And the Stoolies, or the Barstool sort of whole segment of hockey, just tries to tear them down over and over. So amazing what she has done, and just amazing kudos to Leah for being the person she is, and for trying to evoke change too now, which is great that she's giving these presentations, because if somebody says it's impactful, it likely is. Hopefully it is longer than just a one-day impact. And those coaches then teach their cohorts to be inclusive. And so hopefully it does change. But I'm so glad that it was USA Hockey, right, that would have hired her for that?
No, Aaron Wilbur, actually, with the coach's site. So
with the coach's site. Okay, so it's great that he had that wherewithal to do that. That's really impressive too. Yeah,
and I'll let Tom had his hand up, so he can go. But I think just real quick, I mean, it was, well, from a man's point of view, and it was horrific. I mean, she shared these screenshots of the DMs and the text messages and for somebody like me, like, it's hard for me to emphasize, have empathy about it, because I don't even imagine like anybody doing that. I'm like,
right.
Far from. I'm like, who?
Yeah, like, who are these people that are doing this? Like, you don't know those people, yeah, or do we know them? Who knows?
It didn't matter who those people were, because it wasn't like Doc Emmerich saying it to her. It was some guy sitting on his couch in his basement, who doesn't know anything about the sport, So I think she did bring that up. That it's horrific to hear these things, and I think as a personality, and yourself too, right, being a public figure, you almost have to train yourself to understand that these people don't know me, and they don't know who I am, and they have nothing to do with me. but they can impact me just on a typewriter or on a keyboard. Like, but
That showed your age there, Mike, on a typewriter.
on my compact disc. But I think it's but I think it's a great, I mean, like I said, I always felt good for myself that I was like, well, this is so out of the realm of what I could even imagine. And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm not in that world with, like, I'm not associating with people that are in that position to do that. But I can't even imagine what it's like to have that happen to me. But Tom, I know you had your hand.
Oh, and just one last comment. It just shows that all of us can hire those women like that to give presentations at our events too. You know, like, I think that's so impactful because you know what it was like to be in that audience. So
No doubt about it. Go ahead, Tom. I think you were up.
Yeah, I my main comment was kind of back to the old conversation about conferences, but I hear comments about it all the time when I play hockey about the different commentators, and I think Botterall is the most accepted one of all, because just the way she presents and backs up with the video and all that sort of thing. I think she won people's respect.
Yeah,
but it is really hard.
Jen is a really great friend of mine, and it is amazing how many people. She's incredible at what she does. For having 1 year at this level under her belt, she's done exceptional. But it's amazing how many people will comment to me on what she is wearing. Like, have you talked to Jen about what she's wearing? No, I haven't talked to Jen about what she wore on Hockey Night in Canada. That was not part of our conversation. You know, like, it is still such a, like, Bieksa doesn't get comments on what he wore. So Jennifer online gets way more positive comments, but lots of comments about her attire, which to me is bananas, but we're still in that world, I suppose. But you're right. She's done just an exceptional job of, I mean, she's so articulate to begin with, and with a Harvard degree, working as a professional speaker, and having done, I think she did 3 or 4 years with the Islanders first before she got sort of into that position. So she sort of practiced and had a great platform to be able to do this for before she was sort of promoted to high level Hockey Night in Canada.
I would totally agree that Bots is fantastic. Cassie does a tremendous job. Like, as I said, Sammy, like you and Renata did a great job. The U18 stuff are really terrific for Renata to jump in there, and with very little experience, did a pretty nice job for a first time out. And I would have to say, like, I was really impressed with whatever it's TSN, Sportsnet, whoever did the official hiring, to put Poundy in as sort of the lead analyst between periods on the Memorial Cup was really a terrific choice, and I think she did a really fabulous job. And but I was just glad to see that they went to that extent to put a woman in that position again. And then, you know, we're making progress, and it's definitely a sad comment on the world. I guess maybe we say the hockey world generally, that there are so many hockey fans out there who still have their nose up in the air about women's hockey, and by extrapolation have their nose up in the air about female analysts commenting on the games. It's a sad.
It also, you know, to Harna Ryan, who works with Cassie in Calgary, Harna Ryan Singh, and it's not just misogynist comments; it's very racist comments too. So you're right; it is a sad world. But the more we can do to lift these people up that are doing the job that they are doing, I think is important. And great comments about Poundy. She is doing a remarkable job, having gone right from U18s to Memorial Cup. I mean, that's a lot of work, and you can show it shows that she's done the work and is doing a great job.
Yeah, Hunter Ryan and David Amber, obviously men of color on Hockey Night. They are fabulous, like really value adding. And I guess one last comment in terms of balance. Elliot gets many comments on his clothing wear as well, and deservedly so, I guess.
Yeah, that might be a different reason.
Yeah, it should be off the table and to a large degree. But it is entertainment, and hey, great on Bots if she's whatever she's wearing, and if she sticks out because her color or something different, who cares? It's entertainment and whatever. But that's not how we judge her. She does a terrific job, analyzing and supporting her analysis as you have done and as Poundy has done. So it's just great to see the inroads that the women are making.
And one last comment on Bots is that she should have also been inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame this week, and I think was a big miss. But I digress. So should Carolyn Willett.
Her time will come, I'm sure.
I'm hoping.
The Finnish woman was long overdue as well.
Yeah, Sarita Salonen, not to take anything away from her. But they could have inducted too. And Bots has been waiting now for 10 years. It's been a while. So anyways, I digress.
Yeah.
Lots of hands up.
Almost all of you, speaking in the female you, had to wait far too long as well, but her time will come, I'm sure. But
listen, I just wanted to comment. I don't watch the games anymore. I watch between period commentary. And I listened more to the women that are speaking and breaking down what they see, the details of what they're picking out, and Jennifer's exceptional. What Cheryl Pounder did at the Memorial Cup, she was with, who was the lead man there from Calgary that was broadcast? Button.
Craig, yeah. Really good guy, too.
A video breakdown of a player that got his first ever hat trick and had a clip where he back checked to prevent the free player receiving a pass. And she pointed it out, like the detail, how she articulated it. It was amazing. And a little while later, in the next period, Button showed the same highlight of the same player. Now, I didn't need to hear it twice, but that's how astute Cheryl's observation of what was going on there, and just the watching of the game and what they're seeing and pointing out. Those are details of the game that coaches want to see. And I think there's that line, Sammy, like you said, you got to keep the fans in mind that are, who's your audience? So in my case, our audience is pretty academic, and I watch the benches if I watch NHL games, and I watch the communication of the players and the communication of the coaches with one another or the players. So I don't know whether you have to get old to get to this, level of concern or interest, but that's happened to me, and I'm just so proud of the girls that fortunately, Tim, we've been able to work with and coach over the years, and as they take over in different capacities, number one, getting the female game to grow, but also I think they'll have an impact on the male game and the way it's played, both physically, technically, and also emotionally. I think it's just a really good experience, a good balance. So,
well, we could say facetiously that all of those women were exposed to superb coaching over their careers. Laugh out loud.
Well, Tim, as you know, when I took the job at the Oval, I had coached 3 high school sports: football, all boys; track and field mixed; wrestling started out all boys. And when the girls joined in, they saved the wrestling program at the school. And that was neat to be able to work with the sport of wrestling and watching the females come into the game, into the competitive wrestling, and how much they brought to the program. It was just amazing. And then, of course, now in Olympic wrestling, you're watching the female wrestling and the male wrestling, and I think it's really good. Sport is a good way of the inclusivity. And Sammy, we talked the last week's session where you had mentioned, and maybe you can allude to it again just for editing's sake, how the generation of kids growing up, whether it's street hockey or how they're going to be much more receptive to making, changing things for the good. Can you comment, Sammy, a little bit on that?
Well, great point, Wally. I think that all of us can acknowledge on this call that the more integration there is for youth growing up, the more acceptance there will be later, whether that is within culture, race, ethnicity, or gender, or fluidity of gender as well. Things will be different a decade from now than they are currently, but it is really great to see when Confer won the Stanley Cup, my social media feed was filled with the second best Confer just won the Stanley Cup. So that people are acknowledging that there are incredible athletes that are women and that are girls, and I just think the exposure is so key. But the one thing I did mention last week, Wally, was the nomenclature for men and women that is changing. And just for the people on this call to reiterate that male and female are the words used for what a baby is born and what somebody is born with. So male or female is what they're born with. Women and girls and boys and men are what people choose to be. So those are way more inclusive words. So when we refer, and actually talking to Katie about Hockey Canada and Teal, they said that at Hockey Canada, they're changing all the nomenclature to get away from female hockey and getting into girls and women's hockey to be more inclusive of perhaps women that weren't born female, to feel inclusive within the game as well, and vice versa. So it takes some time to get that out of our language. And Kim McCullough referred to it as well, because she runs a business called Total Female Hockey. So how to change that. So the way that I've taken female out of my hockey schools altogether. So it's just Sammy Joe Small Hockey School. But other ways to change that, if it is part of your nomenclature, is female and those that identify as girls or women. Now, I'm not an expert in this field by any means, but if you do have any questions, make sure you Google your nomenclature before you publish anything or put anything out there. So just wanted to put that out there.
I ran into Carol Ouellette. There were three ladies that attended this week's clinic for skill development, high-level skill, the best in.
Who was the third, Wally? Kim and Kettle?
I don't have the name on the top of my head, but I'm sure I probably coached her years ago. But Carol, we talked about her and her partner, Julie Chu, and I brought up the fact she's got to look after the kids when she's away. And it was really funny. Carol Ouellette felt a little bit not taken aback. I'm not sure what the word is. She sensed that, yeah, thank God for Julie doing what she's doing. And she said Julie's going to get involved in the USA Hockey Female program down the road too. But they won the national championship. We had a little bit of a talk about that. And I'm in the room with her and Kim McCullough and the other lady and just had a great chat about what they're doing. And after this call is over, I'm going over to Winsport to meet with Kim, just to catch up with her socially. And the one thing that happened, that the scope of this, I became coming into the Oval Female program having no idea what I was doing working with female hockey. I found it just a joy to work with athletes that wanted to learn, that were curious, that question. And But I had a concern brought to my attention by Cal Botterill about the gender of the team. And I said, I have no idea what's going on. As far as I'm concerned, everything was fine either way. And when over the years, it's evolved to the point where when they do rooming lists, recently with the coach of the female, took over the coach of the female team from Calgary, and you were working with the one in Toronto. I'm not sure what happens out there with rooming lists, but he said he made the rooming list, but he said they made their own rooming lists after that. And compared to what we went through starting in 2000 with the team, I'm just not sure about that. It's a dynamic that for a man, and takes some adapting to an appreciation of the nature of that beast. So
I think, Wally, on that, just on that note, I think that those are athletes going against their coaches the same way that in, say, men's hockey, stereotypically, a man might bring a woman back to his room and tell the rookie to get lost and get out of the room. So, yeah, does that happen? Yes, but it is not prevalent within the women's game. And in fact, most good coaches will know who needs to room with who for their growth and development versus care about the other relationship. And you said gender, I think you meant sexuality, and yes. It certainly is part of the women's game, as it's part of the men's game that we don't necessarily hear about as well. So I think any coach that is all about the growth and development of their players it isn't part of the conversation. It doesn't need to be part of the conversation unless the athlete chooses to share it with you, just like anything else. So I think you're right, Wally, that I think for a lot of people coming to the game, both men and women that would have never experienced that, it was hard to figure out, what do I do here? How do I manage the rooming list? What happens on the road? All those kind of things. But as coaches become better with it all, there can be learning amongst all coaches that can translate into the men's game as well. Because I think on the road rooming roommates, I mean, those are, Tim can probably attest to this in the NHL. I mean, that's where you learn so much from great athletes because you got to room with them once on a road trip or something like that. So I think they can be key learning opportunities for teams.
Yeah, totally agree, Sammy, and really, in any coach of either stripe, girls or guys, who allows or doesn't discipline his team for changing rooms, whether changing roommates, whether for sexual reasons or social reasons, because I've seen it happen. Or on the guy's side, more for social reasons. I don't really like this guy. I'm going to change it. Any coach that allows that to happen is not doing his or her job to enforce discipline and respectful compliance with some very basic, team guidelines, I guess, if whatever. So, yeah, they're. Room lists are, sort of a necessary and should be thought out and carefully planned as best you can. And yes, there's some tremendous social and or developmental learning opportunities that can come from those rooming relationships. And yes, it is really prevalent in the NHL. That they would try to match up sort of an experienced guy with a younger guy. Yeah, so it's an important area for team building, no question.
Anybody else got any other questions? I'm thinking of the rooming lists, and we began the talk, Mike, about clinics and what you get out of it. And at a clinic, I think it was the Hockey Canada one, Wayne Halliwell, a sports psychologist, he was working with the Montreal Canadiens back in the day of Patrick Roy. And they won the cup that year, and he talked about an exercise they did. It had something to do with rooming lists, creating a social milieu of everybody being a part of the team. And he had the players put down the names of teammates who, number one, they would invite to dinner with their family. Number two, who they'd go to a movie with. And number three, who would they would want in a trench in warfare. And he put up the players' numbers in a bar graph and connected lines to see who was connected and who was disconnected. And they worked out the dynamics of the team with those answers to those three questions. And it really contributed to the sensitivity of the importance of relationships and getting players to respect each other and trust one another. But it's a great exercise that could be played with to this day. It has some merit. Michael?
I think that's called a Venn diagram kind of thing, Wally. Yeah.
Okay.
We should maybe get Wayne on to talk about his experience about that.
Yeah, I think that's my point to Wally too, is that, you know, that's I guess the crux of what I was talking about. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I want to see at a coaching conference. Like, I want to know, I don't want to know you won a championship. I want to know how you got there. Like, what were the pieces that you had to overcome and develop to get you to that place where you had success with players. And that's, but I think that really comes down to you get a lot of that stuff in the conversations you have with people outside of their boxed presentation, right? Because Tim's point, you can only say so much in that little 25-minute, 45-minute time frame. So really, what is a way we can get to a point where you can dig in and really understand the nuances of how certain people got to where they got in their team building exercises and connecting players and overcoming adversity. And I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I look for when I go to these things. I'm probably not necessarily looking at the agenda saying, oh, these are 7 subjects I want to listen to. I'm more looking at it like, wow, these are the kind of people I want to connect with to become a better coach.
Good point. Great point. Now, Sammy, I don't know if you were on when Tim talked about Gardner McDougall winning the Memorial Cup and the circumstances. But
I was, yeah, that was great. I would love to hear from him as well.
Yeah, and as you're talking, when we get Howie on, I would ask him that question, Mike. What did you feel you did to contribute to the winning of a championship?
Well, the funny thing is, some guys like that will say, it wasn't me, it was the players, it was what they did, is that how they came together, which is all BS. I'm like, no, you did something. You created the environment. So what is the environment that you created to help that?
And I think he appreciates the things outside of the X's and O's to the point where he might ignore some areas that I would focus on. But he achieved the outcome desired, focusing on the emotional intelligence given his environment and creating a team culture that won a championship. So it's not so much about the X's and O's and that. Both are very important, but I'm really looking forward to future guests that are coming on. And on the 7th, I have a medical appointment with a thoracic surgeon, so I'm not going to be able to join the Shark session, but I hope whoever's on, I might call somebody to try to take the lead if we get a guest on. But I really like the way this is going, and Sammy, the biggest thing I got out of it was having been to clinics as everybody has. I have probably had more spontaneous situations happen, like visiting you and sitting with those coaches and having conversations at the table, goalie coaches, and you sharing the story about what you learned from me about goaltending that I borrowed from Kralik, the goalie, who was this Hasek was his backup for 2 Olympics. Those were moments. Walking into the rink with Tom and watching this drill by Johanni Walston, it was a progression. It was life-changing for me. In other words, something I still talk about today that I would incorporate today that are worth having conversations on. So, Sammy, most of the people on the group are very old and very experienced, and now realize how little we know and how much there is to learn. And I'm curious about you and saying, in your journey as a player, I'm not sure if you've actually coached yet, but you're now moved into casting. What are the things that you have learned about what you do that you have applied, where maybe you weren't as expertise, didn't have the expertise to deal with as well before?
Well, great question, Wally. This is my 25th year of running my hockey school this summer. So, no, I've never had a team from the beginning of a season to the end of the season. I have only coached in this way, in a teaching way, which I've figured out I loved. I did my, what was HP 1, I guess now. So level 4 back in the day for coaching, and realized that being behind a bench didn't bring me the same passion that it did playing. You know, I didn't care as much whether we won. I didn't have that sort of fierceness, but that I really loved administrating, and I loved building team, and I loved everything to do with all of that aspect. So I have continued my career in that direction, but what have I learned that I have, you know, I wish I paid attention to the board more, to be honest. As a goalie, I think I always took those moments to breathe, to focus on what I just, to sort of recap what happened on the last drill for me. I was really good at parking negative things, so bad plays or bad goals, and then at the board would focus on that for me and go through it. And I'd be very much in my own head, even though for those coaches that were coaching me, I was nodding and looking like I was paying attention. I was rarely paying attention. And now that I am broadcasting and learning more about coaching from you guys, you know, I wish I would have paid more attention in terms of the IQ of the game. So really learning the nuances of the game. So many things, I think I've said this to you, Wally, that now I see a man on box behind and instantly think of Wally. I don't think once in a game did I ever think, you know, when it was in the far end, oh, we're playing a man on box behind. So those kind of things. I think I wish I would have been more inclusive as a younger player. I just always thought that the other girls, my peers, never wanted to play hockey. I didn't realize, or maybe even have the wherewithal as a young athlete to know that they didn't have the opportunity to play. They maybe didn't have parents that were protective and allowed them to, you know, they took all the brunt and allowed them to play this game, or coaches that allowed a girl on their team, or communities that allowed girls on their team. I just assumed they didn't want to play this game. I didn't know they had to follow their brothers around and do all of that until I probably got into my teenage years. So I wish I would have been more inclusive at the time of, I would say as a young athlete, I was more chauvinistic than, so I had to learn that the hard way. When I first joined the Olympic team was the first time I really saw girls play. And up until that point, I just always assumed I was the only one and that here I was doing something different, and that really was not the case. So I think since that learning, I have tried to build my career around that, to be inclusive and to ensure that athletes of all levels get opportunities, but also people from all over this country get opportunities as well. That just because they aren't playing doesn't mean they don't want to play. And that hockey doesn't have to be the end all. That I think from you guys, I've learned, and I say you guys in a very open way, all the coaches that I've had over the years, that hockey is simply a conduit for learning and for being fit and active and having a healthy lifestyle. So however that can be accomplished, it doesn't have to be through hockey. So yeah, I think those are some really important things that I was, you know, I don't remember much about the X's and O's that coaches taught me along the way. But I do really vividly know that I transformed in that way to have that understanding. Because as a young athlete, hockey was, I mean, I played a ton of different sports, but sport was everything. It was whether we won the game or not really affected me. And I think I've changed a lot of that in the way I coach / administrate / build, I guess. So once again, Tim, I went on and on and on for what could have been a 30-second answer, but.
Yeah, no problem.
Very good.
Tom's got his hand up, but I will say this, you're probably like 85-90% of the players, Sammy, in not remembering or paying attention to what's going on at the board. That's far too common. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just first I want to say, Sammy, you did a terrific job during that U18 when you're on TV there. And I was just visiting my sister, and Calgary, when she was about 14, they had a girls' league. Just out of nowhere, it appeared a girls' league, and I don't even think they wore equipment. I can't really remember, but she was leading the league in scoring. And she was behind the play once, and she said this big girl they all called Pee-wee, this giant girl, threw her down and kicked her. And she said that she quit after that. She thought, that's not why I'm playing. So those kind of things happen, you know, whatever. But I just wanted to share this one story about back we started off with conferences. So in the one in Vienna, Canada was playing the USA in Innsbruck, and Terry Johnson was with me, and Tracy Lahowie. I don't know if you know Tracy. She played a little for the national team.
I do, and she's from Winnipeg, just like me.
Yeah. So anyways, we all went from Vienna to Innsbruck on the train, and I'd called Danny Heatley. It was 2:05, and asked if he can get us tickets to the game. And he says, "Oh yeah, no problem." So we get there. I talked to him. I said, "The tickets are all sold out." So anyways, he said, "Call Scott Salmon." So I got a hold of Scott Salmon, and he said, "Well, you come, and TJ's with me and Tracy. You come to the game, and I'll get you in." So we're standing at this door that he said to meet us, and he must have forgot because we could see through the window him walking around there. So there was a policeman nearby, and Terry, TJ, he asked to borrow because we had his number, he asked to borrow the policeman's phone. He calls Scott, and then Scott realizes, yeah, I'm supposed to let these guys in. So he comes to the door, but to get in, he gave us the passes of the coaches. So I was Tom Rennie. Tracy was another one of the male coaches, and we're walking around with the Hockey Canada passes. So that's how we got in the game, and we're sitting with a lot of the players just to the left of the benches. So we were sitting right beside a bunch of the Swedes. And so that's how we did get to see that game. And then there was a beer garden after we all went to. We went late in the evening, and there was a train back to Vienna. And I wanted to get there because Scotty Bowman was talking at 8 in the morning. So we took the train and slept on the train. Tracy just went to bed, and I went and I listened to Scotty talk. But that was, we were the big shots for a little while there with our all passes.
Yeah, it's probably a good time with Tom's first comment there to interject maybe a question, because it'd be interesting to hear Sammy's viewpoint. Well, first of all, I wanted to back up one step and suggest, Wally, maybe instead of getting Howie on, we should get Vicky on, because we all know that she was the driving force behind that U18 win, not Howie. But facetiously again, I'm sure she played a part. But, you know, the Swedish Women's League in Sweden has recently added body checking to female hockey, which I will prejudice the conversation, I guess, I think is a real mistake. Because of the story Tom, partially because of the story that Tom just told about some women, like some men or guys, whatever, get chased out of the game because of the physicality. And I don't think the female game suffers one iota from their current status, where there is, of course, a tremendous amount of physical play, but no, I'm going to kill you first with a body check mentality. I think it's going to be detrimental to the women's game. So I'd be interested in Sammy's thoughts, and of course everyone else's as well, because I just think it's a mistake. I don't think it's necessary, and I love the game the way it is and how it slightly differentiates itself from the men's game.
I think, Tim, it'll be really interesting to see how the enforcement of it, because there is no open ice hitting and there is simply board on board contact. So I'd be curious to see if it really changes it from the international game, or if it keeps it sort of more in line and gives the referee more of a description of what black and white is. Because that's the real struggle, right, in women's hockey, is what gets called in certain games. If they push towards that way to determine a real black and white, I like it. But to your point, I think that I don't love, what I love about women's hockey right now is that you can be 5'3" or 6'3" and excel. And I don't necessarily want it to move to a area where it is limited by your body composition. I want it to be more of a skill game, but that's my personal preference. But with no open ice hits, I don't think there will be as much emphasis on size. I just think it'll maybe, because it is a big ice surface, allow for a little bit more battle on the boards. So what do you think about that, Tim?
Well, I'm not. I guess I'm not sure. Like, I'm not as in the know. It was like I haven't read anything about. All I know is they're adding body checking. And so,
yeah, so it is body checking, but only on the boards.
Okay, so how is that not going on right now? That's the.
Well, that's the thing, is maybe it just allows referees to have more of a black and white. Is yes, if the person has the puck, you can hit them on the boards and try to get the puck off of them, but you can't open ice hit them. Mm-hmm. So well, I don't know.
Sir, what I saw in that Canada-US game is it was a one-on-one. I think it was an American coming down the ice, and the Canadian girl played her absolutely perfect and blocked her. You know, because otherwise you would have to get out of her way and give her a breakaway, and she got a penalty for checking. And I think that, you know, whatever the rules are, they've got to, you know.
Well, Tom, you've coached women's hockey for long enough to know that the rules are different every game you go into. That's I don't think that the refs have
men's game too.
Yeah, but the refs are, much to what other people might say, very intelligent people. And it's not like they are trying to do a disservice. It is simply, I think there's very much a gray area right now that's hard to call. Simply
it was really rough along the boards. Like, I thought that was as much hitting as there is in the NHL.
Yeah.
People taking people out, and Howie worked on it a lot, driving the knee behind and the hand and the hip and stuff like this. But that was amazing, that call there. I'm thinking, well, what's she supposed to do? Step out of the way and say, okay, good luck, goalie.
I've thought about this over the years. Quite frankly, the game should be based on body contact. When you use the term body checking, that's one thing. When you use the term hitting, that's unacceptable, because that's the vocabulary of that has a connotation. I believe the judgment by the referee has to be understood by the players and the coaches. The degree of force and the intention. And the refs make a call according to that. And there are times it'll be a little more aggressive than others. But if you're doing it, trying to get possession of the puck, your force isn't excessive. It's the right amount of force. You don't call that penalty that Tom talked about. And if the definition and interpretation of the event, it just requires that, the degree of force and the purpose. Ask the question when you make the call, and you can get reflexively, you can make those calls reflexively. Over time, everybody agrees with them because I just believe the NHL game, Tim, it's more like the female game in terms of skill and the skill and execution they have. Hitting has been reduced substantially. It used to be quite violent, and now I like the way they play physically. Now, I don't know that the women would get that physical, but I thought the male game is coming more towards the female game in terms of the appreciation of the puck and trying to gain possession and the respect for the players. So that's just my 2 bits worth on that one.
I'd just like to make a comment of the Stanley Cup Final there. I think the hardest hit in the entire series was when Stamkos hit McKinnon head on. And I loved the way they both responded. They both went flying. They both got up. Neither one whacked each other, said a thing. They both got up and hit as hard as they could, to go help in the zone. And, just want to comment there.
Good one. Good comment.
On both fronts, Wally, that the NHL game is kind of a better game in that way now. It's not quite as violently physical. It's obviously still physical, but there are certainly many people in the hockey world that think it's going in the wrong direction and there's not enough hitting in the game. But I would agree with you that I think they've found sort of a good level where the game is still very physical, but there's not as much focus on creating intimidation through physicality. There's still an element of that, and many people think there's not enough of that element anymore. But and Tom's point is a good one, that in some ways we're seeing more maturity from the players where, hey, it's a good hit, let's shake it off and go about our business, instead of back in my day, if you lowered the boom on somebody and it was a perfectly legal, well-executed hit, you'd have 3 people circling and ready to beat the crap out of you. And I never understood that mentality where, hey, I hit somebody cleanly, fairly, legitimately, and I'm going to get pounded into submission for it. That element is kind of gone from the game largely. Although if you see Connor get hit in a legal, forceful manner, I'm sure you might see the same kind of reaction. But it's interesting that it may be that Sweden is trying to clarify, but I think it kind of sends a bit of the wrong message, unless their marketing and communication is a lot clearer about what they're trying to do. Again, bad on me for maybe not having the information, but it just occurred to me.
Yep. Tim, can you ask Peter Elander? He's from Sweden, coaching female hockey, what he thinks about it?
Yeah, I'll try to get him to come on. Maybe not next week, since you're not gonna be on, but we'll try to get him on maybe sometime next month, and we could talk about it again. It would be interesting.
Well, I have to go out and check on the boys that are moving dirt and plant pots. I'm going to come back. I hope you stay on and continue the conversation. And initially, Mike, thanks for kickstarting that, because we're at the point where there's not too many different X's and O's that are going to win you a championship or win you a game. And I think the appreciation of the emotional intelligence of the players, and in fact, their hockey IQs are enhanced by playing with less fear of having their heads taken off. A little more respect for the opponent than there used to be is what's happened in the NHL game, and I'm really happy to see that. So,
yeah, I got to run as well, but just before we shut down, Mike, just curious, what was Kara's topic at the conference?
Yeah, so her whole program was about the building grit in her team, and I guess when she got the job, one of the things that was brought to her attention was really how tough she was, like how she just was just a dog out there on the ice. And I didn't realize this, but her husband is a professional football player and
Super Bowl champion,
and
Brown wide receiver.
And she talked about him and how much grit he showed and get on his path. Talked a little bit about it hadn't been cut, and how she was their personal family friends with the coach from the quarterback there from the St. Louis Rams, Kurt Warner, I think it was, right? And how he, how, I don't know if you saw his story, but basically, here's a guy, 2 years beforehand playing arena football and stocking shelves and really where his motivation came from. And actually, that's why I really liked her presentation, because she gave real tangible pieces of how she built that into her players, and between beep tests and accountability and buzzwords and things that they had within their culture and within building their program that all the players bought into and subscribed to. So her stuff was great, and I know they're going to replay that. That will be on the coach's site probably within the month, having access to her presentation. And I thought it was great. I thought it was I thought she did a really good job articulating, what her mission was and what the job was for her team was supposed to do, and they pulled it off by winning, So I think that that definitely adds to her story, right? I mean, but I still think it's just as impactful if they would have come up short. I mean, it just really was just, you could tell, how much her players value her and her work ethic and how she brought that same mentality to the team. So
I'll have to check that out when it comes on Coach's Head, or maybe I'll contact Kara and talk to her about it. But
yeah, she was great. She'd be a great guest too. I mean, just the way she, kind of formulated things. Again, you could have endless guests. You guys know everybody, so it's a matter of just who can make these sessions. But Stefan was going to come on, and I think I was interfering with his golf game, he said this week. So maybe after that.
Yeah, Wally, that'd be another one to add to the list for sure. Kara Morey from Princeton. But I was going to interject too, when you're talking about grit and overcoming sort of adversity. Cale Makar's dad was on CBC yesterday morning, and I think I heard him say that Cale Makar, did not, as a Bantam AAA or midget AAA guy, get a chance to really make or try out for his teams. And he overcame that. He talked about how, okay, so this has happened. What are you going to do about it? And so another story of perseverance, and really, really pretty fantastic. I mean, what a, like I said, I think I started that conversation with Kelly Rudy about, after I watched Makar totally shut down McDavid in a couple of one-on-ones where McDavid had a full head of steam coming at him, and he shut him down completely one-on-one. I just texted Kelly Rudy, I think we're watching the best defenseman since Bobby Orr in the NHL, because I really believe that could end up being the truth. There are a lot of obviously very, very good defensemen over the years, but I'm not sure that I've seen one with a combination of his skating ability, his puck handling ability, deception, and shooting, his physicality, where he can knock the snot out of a lot of people, and his ability to defend and impact the game. Like, there have been a lot of good D, but there are very, very few that have all 5 of those characteristics and more. But it'll be a lot of fun to watch him over the next 15 years or so.
Mike Schumi coached him in Bantam at Northwest there. And he said you knew he was good, but it didn't look like he'd be the best defenseman in the NHL at that time. But he just kept getting better and better. And he says at one time he told him and this Aaron, this really big kid, that they could go offensively anytime they wanted. And it said it totally changed their season. They just started jumping up in the play and, making things happen.
Yeah. Anyway, he's fun to watch, no question. Anyway, gents, well, maybe see you next week, even in Wally's absence. And if anybody has a suggestion on what they'd like to chat about, we can certainly entertain those things. But
guys, I hope you keep it up. I'm not sure how many more sessions I'm going to be around for, but I hope the concept of everybody getting together, somebody takes the lead on, a couple of you, and arrange to have speakers on. And I just find listening, Mike, when you started, I knew I had thoughts related to it, and then I wanted to hear Tim, I wanted to hear Tom, because I know, and that's what I try to do, is draw out the thoughts of the audience, because most of the people have been there and done that. And so when you bring a guest on, they've got an area that's special to them and that they've had success with, and we can interpret that and share it with each other. And then, I enjoy editing the video into smaller pieces that I think might get to people that they might take home and think about at least. So,
the one thing I didn't mention, Wally, which was great too, is after 2 years, I got to actually meet all these great social media connections I've made. Greg Revac was there live, and Pete Kamen from Elevated Hockey, and obviously meeting Gino, live, in person, at the conference was great. So was a whole nother aspect of, going to these things, especially now in our this digital age where you actually got to put a name with a face and shake a hand and have a real actual conversation, live in the hallways of the University of Michigan there. So that was great. But really, really appreciate you letting me come on again. And again, these are great for me, so I love them.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you next week, guys.
All right. Good luck.
Mike, if you can get any one of the people you mentioned on next week and sort of be the host and guide people through the conversations. Tim, you had mentioned Cavallini down the road. He fits into the bill too. A guest who would get talking about things in a way that would make a difference to the people who are listening. Yeah, anyway, I've got to go and check on the boys that are toiling away in my backyard. And thank you very much, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Wally. Okay? Make sure they don't dig up the rose bushes. All right.
Oh God, it's too late for that. I've already screwed up.